Is the first book the one you were reading the other day with the historic titties?
No. That's a different book, and
that's for a different episode.
And maybe for another episode, yes.
Diana After Dark with historic titties.
Please insert straight woman jokes here.
I'm not inserting anything anywhere. Diana, no. Just no. Never again utter those words. Ever again. Slaps hands, sprays water, never make any references to the seed of life ever again.
Hi guys, welcome to another episode of Totally Unrelated. Please join me in welcoming Eliza on her second appearance on this show, and may there be many more of these in the future.
Hear.
Servus, what have you been up to lately?
I mean, just hanging on to dear life, screaming into my scream jar, and just, I don't know, PMSing all over the place, having period poops. As you all know.
I mean, if you didn't, now you know. For this episode, I thought about, how people keep saying history repeats itself, only to then be corrected by pedants who tell them that, well, actually, history doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme. And then, on top of that group, there's a larger group of people who, upon hearing these works, just goes, I don't care about that kings and shit. Rent's due in 5 days and my paycheck in 8. How's Napoleon gonna help me with that?
I mean, granted, Napoleon couldn't really help you with getting a jar of pickles off the middle shelf, so...
But if you destroys your village with his marching army, then probably rent is not going to be a concern anyhow. So
and neither will the jar of pickles. So
yes, exactly. See, this is how you seek solutions.
Positive thinking, Diana.
Problem solver.
Yes, exactly.
You don't see hindrances, you just see challenges.
Exactly. Oh, I just grossed myself out.
So, I don't know about you, but in my experience as a sort of history lover, history buff, I think that the best way to get people who aren't interested in history to pay attention to whatever you're trying to tell them is to compare certain events, people, or trends of the past with their closest modern-day equivalent. And there are people who would frown at such popularizing efforts, but, this is not a serious political or historical podcast. And, one could even argue this is barely a podcast. and we are certainly not serious people. So I think,
How dare you? How dare you?
All the disclaimers have been uttered.
Fetch my smelling salts, jeebers.
Yeah, so, we're all just trying to learn more about the world around us. And sometimes the best way to do that is to look at the shadows of the past.
Of which Napoleon could not cast a long one.
Well, apparently, actually, he wasn't that short for his time period. I think it was just slander. I say slander.
I mean, technically, yeah, no, because people were pretty short. I remember I went to, there's this really cool museum in Germany. Can't remember the name right now. I'm going to have to look it up. You just said
Germany.
In Germany, yes. Where Heidi Klum is from. And, oh my God. I'm so annoyed I can't remember the name. Anyway, it's a really cool place. It's a massive site. They just walked around for like 10 hours and I didn't even get to see anything. But they have a section, it's in the Eifel region of Germany. They have a section which is basically a massive hangar. And the inside of it is... A
hangar where you hang people, or a hangar where you put planes?
I mean, planes, I guess. But they don't have planes in this one. It's basically sort of like the later parts of German history. So they start in the 1700s with the Napoleonic wars and everything. And it's really cool. They have like, life-size wax figures and recreated scenes, and it goes all the way up until the early 90s. So there's gonna be a couple of areas with streets that are bombed by the Nazis, and there's down planes and shit. It's like immersive as fuck. It's super, super cool. But when you're at the beginning of it, I mean, I'm a midget. Like, I'm super short. Not legally like a small person, but just, I'm short. I'm very short. And
you're sort of medium sized for a Romanian woman.
I mean, I don't know how to feel about that specific description, but sure. But like in the general, well, compared to Western Europeans, I mean, I'm a midget. Like, Jesus Christ, you could barely see.
You're child-sized.
Yeah, you could barely see me from the top of the counters back when I was living in the Netherlands. So like, it's fine. Everything is fine. Anyway, and the French soldiers and like the people in general, but specifically the French soldiers, are so tiny. Like, I could literally look down on them, which was, let me tell you, a super empowering experience to be able to look down on the French. Because we know that it's usually...
We need to discuss, in one episode, we really need to dig into your problem with the French. Because I
don't have a problem with the French. I just think that the French in general have a problem with the world. And they're just, they're the French. I mean... It's not like we're punching down here. You know what I mean? It's the French. We're not punching down. And I have this theory and plenty of anecdotal evidence for it that just general hatred for the French would totally bring the world together. Like, this is how we get to world peace. Like, if the UN made hatred of the French the central part of their policies, nobody would be fighting anymore. Putin would be like doing high fives with Biden. Merkel and Erdogan would be just like broing it out, slamming drinks, getting freaky. Like, everything could work out.
Show me where the onion soup has hurt you, Eliza. Show me.
Oh God. Yeah, on the doll, right? No, there's plenty of other crappier nations. I mean, but it's just, it's the pomposity. It's just simply the pomposity. It's just, because there's a lot of cultures that like to act superior, especially when you think of Western Europe and the former colonizing nations. Well, former, so to speak.
I mean...
Not so former.
Old habits die hard.
Oh, so hard. So hard. So hard. I think Bruce Willis still has a couple of installments until they totally die. But there's just a specific flavor of, like, the French superiority that just, like, is, bamboo slivers underneath my fingernails. But we digressed from our main subject today.
Yeah, well, okay, so let's kick off this here session. And I want to propose to you something we might call a 19th century version of a React video between two internet communities that have been sniping at each other since time immemorial. Feminists versus the Manosphere.
Men's rights activists, please, you feminazi.
Well, yeah, but I mean, they are a world of their own on the internet, and I want to honor that.
Yeah, I can feel the honor in the tone of your voice. It's the only honor is what you feel.
Yeah, and just a reminder, back in the old days, the Manosphere used to be, basically society as a whole.
Oh yeah, and I'm so happy we've gotten over that. We've moved so far. Like, it's equality just up the wazoo nowadays. It's just like, I'm so sick of all the equality. Frankly, I could use with a little bit of discrimination based on my gender. It's not like there's just like horrible violence against women everywhere.
I feel like this is going to be another one of those episodes where Eliza just goes, oh, I'm so happy this is not happening anymore.
Yeah. Right. It's just hashtag sarcasm. Because apparently you have to point that to some people that I'm not being serious when I say that.
You have to whistle when you sarcasm.
I mean, then we're shit out of luck because I don't know how to whistle.
Oh, no?
Wait,
really?
This is. Let me show you my best attempt at a whistle.
Oh my God, that's so
I know
That's
it's
so weak, Eliza.
I know it's super anti-feminist of me. I should know how to. Show me your whistling skills. It's all about the tongue game, Diana.
Okay, so back to our thing that we're doing.
I'm barely.
Okay, so now since we're about to witness a fight, let's see our champions. In the right corner, a man of high distinction and privilege, literary critic, conservative politician, one-time prime minister, as well as minister of foreign affairs. The guy whose Wikipedia page has a special entry for his publicly expressed misogyny. Titu Maiorescu! And in the left corner, and similarly situated on the political axis, Romanian socialist and feminist extraordinaire, Sofia, appropriately named Nadejde.
Boo! Women belong in the kitchen! It's how I imagined like an actual match would have gone down between them in those days.
So before we dig into the actual text, I say we try to get the sense of the general context, right? Because we're being very thorough.
Yeah.
And this is totally not just for shits and giggles.
No, we are a serious show. Yes.
So the feminist movement in Romania is a pretty new topic for me as well, because this is what comes with living on the periphery, culturally speaking. It's more likely you know stuff about what was happening at the time in England or France than in your own country. But I say we make the best of it and learn about this together. So
I mean, if this isn't like the peak mindset of just like Eastern Europeans in general, I don't know what the fuck it is. But seriously, like, I mean, we kind of did some stuff, but like, you know, we're on the sidelines. You know, we're the girl who doesn't get asked to dance because she wore the weird clothes to the party or something like that, and then inevitably somebody drops a bucket of blood and guts on our heads.
History just happens to us. We don't know what's what. History just happens, and then we're like, oh, I guess. Yes.
Guess it's Tuesday again.
So I flipped through 2 books for this episode, both of them in Romanian, and from what I can tell, none of them have been translated as of yet. One is Sofia Nădejde's Anthology of Romanian Feminist Texts from 1838 to 1929, and the other is Adrian Dohotaru's book, The Socialists, A Heritage, 1835 to 1921. So what the hell do you think was going on in what came to be known as Romania in the 19th century, Eliza?
I mean, I don't think there's enough vodka in the world for me to even attempt to dive into that, but I think we can all agree that it was probably a rapey bonanza with a side of mămăliguță cu brânză de burduf. So, I considering how things are now...
You are assuming people who could afford dairy.
Oh yeah, and just afford to mămăliguță. I mean, I think that was also among the luxury items at this point. People just photosynthesized back then, you know, while they worked the fields, and then just probably chomped on some, like, I don't know, grass from the side of the street.
Just as an aside, I know I've read the fact that even though you would think that all the people who actually grew most of the stuff, in terms of, you know, both grains and cattle and, you know, the dairy that comes along with it, they really didn't incorporate that into their diet because they had to sell most of these things because they were poor.
And the rent was too damn high.
Yeah, so actually the diet was quite bad for most of the rural population, at least. It was heavily reliant on, polenta, basically.
Well, don't tell the crunchy crowd, because the crunchy crowd thinks that farmers from like 100 and 150, 200 years ago just ate all organic, you know, like they just went out and they picked it off like the trees and just like raw, vegan, paleo, whatever. And that's why they didn't have cancers, not because they were all dead by 35.
Yeah, well, they picked it off the tree, but then they had to sell it because...
No. Money wasn't invented back then, yeah. We were just all pure and crunchy. And, like, we didn't need vaccines, right? Because, like, our body heals itself if you just, like... with the energies of the world, you know, and if you're not like in touch with them, just put a crystal in your
vagina.
Yes, I was trying to not say vagina, but
Why do you think this is that sort of podcast where you have to?
No, I was trying to decide between
where you have to mind your words.
Oh no! I was just trying to decide whether I should go with yoni or coochie. And then I just like got locked into making that decision. I just couldn't decide. So yeah. Tell me how awesome it was for women back then. Because men opened doors, you know, and they didn't rape because rape was invented by the liberals. Probably along with racism and, you know,
and it only happens in Sweden, right?
Of course. It never happens here. No.
I was thinking about the fact that sometimes we're surprised by those factoids you learn about how, say, there are more women in STEM fields in Eastern Europe than in the woke West. And, you know, of course, that is in many ways due to the communists' obsession with churning out engineers and then subsequent political decisions to make tech jobs attractive. But the 19th century equivalent of that is the weird factoid that 43% of the Romanian Principality's working population was made up of women, which was a larger share than in many other countries like, you know, England or France or even, well, you know, what would become Germany.
Yeah, because we were fucking poor.
Yeah, and yes, a majority of those worked in agriculture because... you know, agriculture around here parts at that time, and not just then, was poorly mechanized and needed a lot of hands in the fields.
I mean, this is one of those things that super annoys me because, like, oh yeah, the working woman, and we had like such a leg up compared to the West and whatever. That's bullshit. They weren't working women. They were little more than chattel. Mm-hmm. I mean, you know a little bit of my history. My grandparents were subsistence farmers on both sides, and especially my maternal grandmother's stories of what farming and just like rural life was like in the 30s and 40s, like the 1930s and 1940s. So this is way after this time. Things are a little bit better. But it's exhausting and soul-crushing. Before anybody goes, oh, but no. Women just tended to the house and ran the house. They fed the chickens maybe and they cooked. And they were like, oh, bullshit. No, the fuck they didn't. They worked the goddamn fields alongside the menfolk. Often, by the way, pregnant or a toddler strapped to their backs. I mean,
yeah, there is a reason why you have many sort of births happening on the fucking field in Romanian literature.
Yeah, on the field, and especially during harvest seasons, because the work was so incredibly physically exhausting that women often went into labor well before the 9 months, FYI. But I think it's not that difficult to imagine if you're like 6-7 months pregnant, you know, and you have to be bent over backwards literally for 12, 13, 14, 16 hours a day because, yeah, you worked from literally sun up to sundown until you had just natural light outside. And by the way, that wasn't just it, because if the moon was waxing, so if the moon was waxing or close to full or full, they worked during the night as well. So you'd work until there was literally no more light outside. You'd stumble home into dark, or maybe even just sleep outside in the field. And then when the moon rose during the night, you woke up and worked some more until the moon went down. And then maybe you got an hour or two before the sun came up again. And you worked and you worked and you worked with no shoes, like food.
Because you were in touch with the earth, Eliza.
Yeah, you were so in touch with the earth.
Yes.
Yeah, because...
just getting all your energy directly from the source, from Mother Earth.
Yeah, and then you had to do a little bit of a blood sacrifice, right, every now and then, because... If generally speaking, if a family had
and sometimes the blood sacrifice was your wife.
Yeah, but there was also the little known fact that if you were in a family with more than 5-6 kids, let's say something like it, at least one of the kids was missing like a strategic toe or something, because you were working the fields until you got completely exhausted, and coordination and exhaustion don't really work so well together, so there would be accidents. I like the whole naturist thing. Not naturist, Jesus Christ. Not naturist. Those are nudists. But like this whole, being more in touch with the earth, eco-friendly practices, biological culture, whatever. I'm into that shit. But not when it comes to framing the past as this magical, clean place where only clean things happen and everybody was happy and healthy. No. Lives were incredibly difficult for the majority of the population, and it pisses me off so much how people don't wanna consider that, or they act like that's not true, or that's so far back in history. Like, 500 years ago maybe, but not my great granddaddy, not my nana. No, that was probably your nana too. And for us, especially in this space of the world, where things are still so very agriculturally based and the population is still so heavily rural, it's still a reality to this day. Most of the farming we have in this country is also still subsistence farming. And it's either subsistence farming or, the big agro companies that bought the lands from subsistence farmers for like next to nothing. But I think maybe that's, again, another subject for another episode about the Lay's potato fields in some of our most economically depressed areas of the country and all of that fun stuff.
Yeah. So we talked about how women were making up a large share of the agricultural workforce, but the number of women working industrial jobs was also increasing in the 19th century, mostly in textile and food production in Moldova and Wallachia, and tobacco, paper, and textile manufacturing in Transylvania.
And we all know all those industries tended to be super safe, especially in those years for workers. It's not like Dickens made a career out of writing about that shit.
Yeah,
Please, sir, may I have some more?
You won't be surprised then to learn that working conditions were atrocious.
Oh, really? They didn't have like a ping pong room and like snacks and shit?
A PlayStation in the game room.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
totally.
So actually, I mean, we're joking here, but the conditions were so bad that in 1902, for instance, the Hungarian newspaper Népszava actually reported that several families of workers in Alba County had committed suicide to avoid the hunger and misery that was their life. So
yeah,
it was bad.
Not too dissimilar to what we're seeing in India with farmers that, for years now but India has this massive issue with farmer suicides also because of that. So, yeah. What were you saying at the beginning of the episode about history repeating itself? I'd say it's not so much repeating itself as it's still ongoing. Or, yeah, and before everybody's like, but that's India and it's a third world. Well, first of all, it's not. And second of all, Amazon, Jeff Bezos.
I don't think US farmers are doing that great either, from what I've learned. So
yeah. Well, maybe, hopefully, things are going to change a little bit with the new aid package that was passed that has some pretty nice provisions for farmers, especially farmers of color. Mm-hmm. So that could be super cool.
Yeah.
But, we don't even have to think of farmers because that's apparently super removed from a lot of people's lives. But Amazon and working condition in Amazon warehouses, like, that's what we're talking about in this context. Like, okay, they don't necessarily get their hands chopped off by like shitty textile weaving contraptions, but
they have plenty of health issues though.
Health issues and health hazards, because the quotas are insane and the injury rate is massive. But sure, let's pretend that the things have changed so radically.
And I think that for instance, even in Romania, when you talk to people about delivery services, everyone complains about both the postal office and the private delivery services, and they both have their faults. But the thing is that very few realize that the reason why your delivery guy or occasional gal is so maybe annoying or not very helpful is because they are stressed out of their fucking mind because of their quota for each day. And so of course, when you know that in order to get your salary, or your base salary at least, you have to deliver a certain number of parcels, and that number of parcels is probably a lot higher than would be normal under normal conditions. And I mean,
that should be normal. I think is the operative word here. But then you just get this really bad cycle where the employees are stressed out. They are not particularly helpful with people who get their packages and maybe cannot always be on time to pick it up, or they leave heavy packages. If you live in a sort of apartment building, they won't even come to your door and leave it there, although that's how they should be delivering certain things, and so on and so forth. And then people tend to blame whoever they're interacting with, rather than think about why is this happening over and over again, because obviously it's not just one individual being an asshole, so it's probably a systematic
something.
Issue.
Yeah.
But I'd like to make a little bit of a side note here.
A side note to the side note.
You know me, that's how I roll. It's all ellipses, baby. But it's totally agree with that. Conditions are horrible. They're paid shit. They're paid absolute shit, and a lot of people act like somehow delivery people are subhuman. Like, oh my god, you brought me my package, I'm just gonna talk shitty because you're like, club or whatever, which obviously is disgusting. And we've discussed this so many times of the issues with people, treating people in service industries, whether that's cleaning staff or wait staff or whatever, like they're not actually human. But I think one of the quite typical issues, again, that we have with the whole delivery system in Romania is that there's a very strong toxic masculinity issue within it. Because, the female workers are just as overworked, if not more, because this is a heavily male-dominated industry, and we all know how dudes get like, oh, you're a girl, you can't lift shit. And I gotta say, it's always a drastically different experience when I interact with female delivery workers and male delivery workers. They're not gonna be they also do the same thing of like not bringing the package to your front door or whatever, even though that's a service that technically you're paying for. But they're not dicks. And somehow, I don't know, it's gotta be this female superpower. Somehow female delivery workers manage not to make shitty jokes and be leery, creepy, and like head on you, or maybe like try to friend request you on social media afterwards because they got your beats from your goddamn fucking package, because that's not weird or illegal or whatever. Like, GDPR, bitch. So, like, again, not to dismiss the systematic issues, and definitely that needs to change, and it should change because, of course, it would also make sense financially, you stupid fucks, because if you pay people well and don't give them workloads that are too massive, then they can actually pay attention to the packages unless shit would be broken or lost in transit, which would entail, saving money and stuff. But again, what do we know, Diana? We don't know anything. What would say small women brains cannot process anything.
Yes, well, this is very on topic, considering what we're going to talk about, small women brains.
I mean, it's the curse of our gender. It's just our teeny tiny itty bitty female brains.
Yeah. So in terms of labor conditions, as we discussed, things still aren't great, but they were really bad at that time. But how were the feminists doing at this time? Were they cringe or were they based? Well, as they say, ¿por qué no los dos?
I mean, as is so often the case around these here parts.
Yeah. So we are still dealing with a movement that seeks to extract concessions from society through respectability tactics. They would use discourse that emphasized women's capacity for rationality and generally focused on the similarities between the two sexes. There is a clear attempt to stay away from anything that might bring attention to specifically feminine traits or experiences, with, of course, the exception of maternity.
I wonder in which category does period poops fall in?
Oh, that's very feminine.
Is it a super feminine trait or experience that you're not allowed to talk about, or does it fall, in the range of the maternal?
I mean, Eliza, I'm sorry to inform you of this, in the middle of the podcast, but I think periods are verboten as well to discuss. Usually, in polite society, I mean. I know that so far the male audience for this podcast is tiny, but we're not doing ourselves any favors with such dirty topics? Female talk. Yes,
like period poops.
Yes,
but the menfolk need to be ready. Those who are hetero are gonna be faced with period poops sooner rather than later, probably. And if my dude, if you're in your 20s and this is the first time you've heard about period poops, you need to hit the fucking books. You should probably not be having sex if you don't know about the period poops, is all I'm saying.
So the rationale of feminists at the time to have this approach was that before expanding the scope of the movement, women needed to secure a modicum of political power. For some, that meant getting the vote. For people with leftist convictions like Sofia Nădejde, it also meant economic independence.
Cardi B approves.
Yes. In any case, we are still far, far away from any spicy conversations about sexuality or even,
Cardi B disapproves.
Or even having one in those rather Victorian times. Still miles to go towards a worker's wet-ass pussy utopia.
Certified freak, 7 days a week. Wet-ass proletariat, make that union-busting weak!
Yeah, although we all know that, well, do we all know? We should know.
I don't know. What do we know? What are we talking about?
What do we even know? Anyway, in the 19th century, even some leftists were cringy, claiming that, for instance, man was the head of the household, not because he could punch anyone who would argue otherwise into submission, but because of the natural division of labor, concluding thus that it would be natural to have a much smaller quota of women in public offices under, 19th century steampunk sodomite communism or whatever it was that they were hoping to achieve.
Yes, Diana, but you forget, the man is the head of the house, but the woman is the neck that turns the head.
Yes. Given the rather unfriendly circumstances, it's not all that shocking, I think, that many of these feminists weren't particularly sex positive.
I'm shocked, really. so shocked.
Yeah, in fact, our absolute femme, Sofia, warned against the excessive application of makeup in what can best be described as a tribal manner.
Oh, white feminists.
Yeah.
Why are our people so cringy?
Brace yourself, there's going to be more of this. She mocked upper-class women for making hay about their charity work, which she, quite rightly I would say, identified as a flimsy band-aid slapped on the wounds left by massive social inequality.
The poor are a burden.
Yes, Sofia was also opposed to the use of corsets because they emphasized parts of the female anatomy that made their wearers too distracting for all the serious logic bros they wanted to engage with in the marketplace of ideas.
I mean, yes, because how dare a woman be hot, and you cannot be smart and hot at the same time. We all know that this is just a law of the universe. It's like, I think Einstein said it.
Yeah, although I would argue that at least the young Sofia Nădejde was not a bad-looking chick.
Okay, but not to be mean.
But you're going to.
I mean, I never am. We all know. I just describe people accurately. Why does she bears more than a passing resemblance to Mr. Bean?
That's right.
Like,
it's true.
It's the expressions and everything. I think this is like a long lost auntie of him.
Might be. I don't know. Yes, she is striking, I would say. She's not ugly. She's not particularly beautiful, but she's definitely striking.
I mean, that's not even the point. Although I guess there is a little bit of point to be made in this context, since she's the one who's bitching about other people's looks. So I think if you punch towards that direction, you're kind of opening yourself up to a line of attack.
Yes, but it's all for the cause. She was attacking her sisters for the cause. So, anyways, the whole point was Sofia was a serious woman engaging in the marketplace of ideas, and she certainly did. She and her hubby, both ardent socialists, edited Contemporanul, a paper that ended up having considerable reach and influence in intellectual circles. And the couple was actually actively monitored by the government because they were seen as conducting subversive activities, and an officer would make notes on anyone entering or leaving their house, which was effectively the HQ of the newspaper. So, what were the scary and subversive shenanigans they were up to editing their newspaper? Well, debunking and presenting counterpoints to public figures who oppose women's emancipation, and occasionally they would also advocate for improvements in labor conditions.
No.
So, very edgy.
Oh, no.
Yes, it's...
Oh, no. But you have to pull yourself up by the bootstraps.
Yeah. Well, I mean, by the pinka straps.
Yeah. If they had any, because let's face it.
In Romania's case.
Shoes were a luxury item.
Yes, they were. If you got your boots, then you knew you were going to go into town, probably, or something.
Yep.
Or going to school in the nearby town.
I mean, but I don't know. Again, grandparents, mine, many years went to school without shoes. So, again, and this is not that long ago. This is especially in the post-World War II years. Yeah, very much. For a large percentage of the population, shoes were very much a luxury item. But yeah, I mean, the subversiveness.
Yeah. So, fun fact. Sofia had a brother by the name of Octav Băncilă, a realist painter and eventually left-wing activist. His sister was several years his senior and actually raised him once she got married to Ioan Nădejde, and encouraged him to pursue his passion for painting. In 1907, following the crushing of the Romanian peasants' revolt, he roamed the countryside trying to gather evidence of government repression and violence. And Băncilă also used his art to attack anti-Semitic trends in Romanian society because, in the interwar period, there was a lot of that.
No, there wasn't. That's a liberal myth. No anti-Semitism. Never was, never will be, never is. Like, we just, people really love the Jews here. That's why they suddenly disappeared after World War II. Jews up the wazoo everywhere, and then suddenly, by the mid-40s, no more Jews anywhere. It's the Jewish rapture probably happened.
Well, anyway, in conclusion, with regards Octav Băncilă, I think we can say that his sis taught him well.
I mean, yeah, he seems pretty chill so far.
Now, Sofia's back and forth with Titu Maiorescu won't be the only public feud she will have with a prominent conservative politician. Petru Misir, another literary critic and, as it happens, close friend of Titu Maiorescu, claimed that women were basically living off the backs of the poor men.
Yeah.
And Sofia retorted by pointing out that domestic work is work, my dude, even if your sorry ass don't want to pay for it.
But won't somebody think of the man, Diana? Won't somebody think of the man and the bad days that they have?
Well, that's why you had the angel of domestic bliss, right? That's what the woman was supposed to be in those times. She was supposed to take the husband's mind off the hardships that he was facing in the rough and tumble world of, the outside world.
Oh, yeah. Being his mother and free domestic worker and basically free sex worker. Yeah.
Eliza, have you heard about the term MGTOW?
Yeah, but I wish men would really go their own way. Except they don't. They
never do.
Their way somehow just comes right in front of the way of women and just our general peace of goddamn mind.
So for anyone listening who doesn't know what MGTOW stands for, it stands for men going their own way. And again, like we said, they never do. They stay behind to constantly complain.
Yeah. They keep saying that they'll go their own way, but they never do. They just keep saying it.
And actually, just like our 19th century bro, Misir, did, they say things like, well, marriage is a setup that solely benefits women.
I mean,
because it does. Yes, of course. Because it ties men whose, ardent love for any woman basically has an expiration date of about 2 or 3 months. It ties men to shoes for life. And, Sofia just shrugs him off and says something along the lines of, if that's the extent and depth of human relationships that you can envision with someone you'd marry, changing the laws is unlikely to address your issues, good sir.
But these dudes don't see us as humans. So, of course, it's like 2 or 3 months into it, you're tired of your new puppy or PlayStation or whatever. Because, again, women are not human.
Now, let's dig our teeth into the main course of this episode. Sofia's response to Titu Maiorescu is triggered by a public lecture held by the guy called Darwinism and Intellectual Progress.
Oh my god, there's gonna be so much racism here, isn't there?
She starts by citing some of his main points. So these are the things Maiorescu proposes as his hypothesis. There is such a thing as a progression of intellectual faculties and abilities throughout history. And wouldn't you know it, Maiorescu is gonna prove his point by talking about skulls.
Oh god.
To be more precise, cranial capacity in his case, because he's a pedant. And he proceeds to list a series of measurements done on 11th and 12th century skeletons in comparison with 18th and 19th century counterparts. He then compares all of those measurements to the average cranial capacity of people in his present at that time, casually remarking, of course, how Europeans have the galaxiest of brains and that only monkeys, and I quote, roughly 45% of the wild races of Australia still have the much smaller cranial capacity of past centuries. White man's gonna white man.
Yeah, but I mean, why? And again, the sad part about all this shit is that so many people to this day, like, actually believe this and think this and think it's okay to just go around saying it out fucking loud. Like, no, don't keep it inside. Keep it inside. Shut your mouth hole and keep it inside. You don't have to announce to everybody that you're a goddamn fucking moron.
I don't even know if keeping it inside is actually the solution, because obviously even if you keep it inside, it will show up in the way you treat people. I mean, just because you don't say racist shit, you can still act racist.
At least have the decency to have your fucking clan meetings in the backyard of your nana's house.
Well, anyway, Maiorescu follows up with a first sprinkling of misogyny. You see, he points out, the average cranial capacity of women is 10% smaller than that of men. He then makes a vague gesture towards material conditions, which might explain the difference in cranial capacity. Now, ignoring for a second the validity of a correlation between intelligence and skull size, he rightly identifies that where gender roles have become more rigidly defined, those with both more access to the tools of learning and need to use them on a daily basis would, of course, have acquired a certain advantage over time. Centuries down the line, that would show up in physiological differences as well. So he argues that when most people were peasants engaged in subsistence farming, or, if you are a modern day savage, of course, there were hardly any measurable differences between female and male skulls because everyone was a dumbass, basically.
Except the rich.
Except the rich. So, this is the precursor of randos on the internet going, well, I'm not saying it's because of their race. It's the culture, you see. They either don't have enough of it or it's the wrong one.
Well, but if other cultures are so fucking wrong, why do white people go around stealing all the other cultures, huh? Fucking Kevin from, I don't know, middle of fucking Iowa?
Well, if you've listened to I think the first and the second episode, it's not white people stealing other people's culture. They are stealing it back, you see. That's what they said to themselves. We were taking our Aryan heritage back from all the Indians and the Jews and just all the non-white people who were... They were just, sort of preserving the stuff that we've forgotten about.
It's just such bullshit, because at the end of the day, we all know that it's not even our culture. It's just
it's all Dacian culture.
It's ancient aliens.
No, I'm sorry, Eliza. I'm going to shut down that. It's Dacians. We all know that, whether you're talking about the Japanese culture or whatever, it's all the Dacians all across the globe.
Plot twist. What if the Dacians are actually the aliens?
I mean, they are the chosen people.
Yes, they're the chosen people. I think they're the aliens. The question now is, which race of aliens? Is it the Raelians? Is it the Reptilians? Is it the Nordic ones? Is it the Greys? Is it the Greens? I feel like this is an endless bit of sarcastic remarks, this whole thing about the culture stealing and the Dacians, and so maybe let's just take a step forward beyond that.
Yeah. So for Maiorescu, as we've seen, it's all about them games, baby, and it's use it or lose it when it comes to brains.
And we all know that women don't use their brains. They're teeny, tiny women brains.
And although being condescending towards poor people within your own culture, almost as much as towards the savage races, was pretty on brand for many conservative and even, liberal-leaning politicians and intellectuals at that time, Maiorescu had to be a bit more delicate about the whole thing. At least a bit. He himself had humbler origins than some of his peers, who were either part of the local aristocracy, the boyars, or part of influential Greek families that had run the show in the Romanian principalities in the 18th century. Maiorescu's mother, born Maria Popazu, was the sister of a scholar and bishop of Caransebeș, Ioan Popazu. His father, Ioan Maiorescu, was essentially the son of a Transylvanian peasant who then became a theologian and an important figure in the formation of the modern Romanian educational system.
Yeah, but Maiorescu is one of the good ones because he pulled himself up by the bootstraps by marrying up. Like, he's literally a gold digger in this case.
Yes, yeah. But he had to be a bit more careful about saying that the poor are also stupid because
he'd call himself out.
Yeah, well, not necessarily himself, but like his family down the line eventually,
and himself.
So getting back to his argument, we have the dawn of history. He says, when men and women are equally stupid numbskulls. But then came the white man. And poor thing, he took it upon himself to create culture, the arts, and live in a society.
Yeah.
Is it time for women to step up and do the same? No. Patriarchy says no.
Slaps hand.
Nem szabad.
Yeah, totally big nem szabad vibes.
Nu-i voie, Eliza.
Nah.
Although I have to say, I am pretty disappointed by how limp his arguments against emancipation is here.
I mean, I'm pretty sure that's not the only thing that was limp in his life.
Yeah, well. So let's quote the man. On the issue of women's emancipation, I would only note that the idea, despite its theoretical beauty, is, under current conditions, rushed and a little unfeasible. How could we place the fate of nations in the hands of beings whose cranial capacity is 10% lower? Especially given how even the brightest minds of our times are only barely able to drive a nation on the path to material progress and prosperity. Of course, on an individual level, one cannot deny that we might come across a woman that is wiser than us.
Yeah, but even the rare ones that are smart, who are probably uggos, because we know that's how it works, they still get periods and get all crazy up in their little woman brain.
Can't trust them, really.
No.
Yeah. So, his lamentation about how not even the galaxy brains can handle the complexity of the world sort of strikes me as exactly the sort of argument you'd make against his point of keeping women uneducated or barely educated, because even if women were across the board just 10% less intellectually capable than any random man, you'd still want more processing power to more efficiently deal with the world's ills and challenges, right?
Yes, but periods.
Yeah, okay, but even if, even if you admit all his stupid and totally unscientific points, even then, but it's still every bit helps, right? Even if there are
periods.
But okay, so maybe
it's
they're
still
out of
the argument to this day. I mean, it's still the argument. For fuck's sake, they didn't want Hillary as president because she's menopausal.
But even if they're out of order for a set amount of time each month, it's still extra.
You underestimate you overestimate men's knowledge of how female bodies work. There's loads of men walking around out there with fucking voting rights and probably a bigger paycheck than us who think that we have our periods half the month. That's it, But it's a choice. And we just bleed into our fucking panties because we're dirty creatures, because we don't want to hold it in.
You mean nocturnal pollutions?
Yeah, except it's all of the time. And then we act like entitled bitches because we have to pay for the products that keep us from bleeding all over the place because we can't be bothered to hold it in until we go to the bathroom.
Just hold it in.
No, God. They could only hold in their breaths for at least 10 minutes. The world would be so much better.
So how does my girl Sofia respond to these big brain boy takes? In the time-honored tradition of white feminists, by being problematic herself. She points out that while there is a link between brain size and intelligence, it is not as straightforward as claiming that the larger the better. Please insert straight woman jokes
I'm not
here.
inserting anything anywhere.
So, as a counterexample, she says that the average cranial capacity of Peruvian women is smaller than that of, there's that word again, savage Polynesian women, but that no one would argue about the superior intelligence of the former. Damn, girl!
Yeah.
Citation needed.
Yeah, and also just Polynesian women, really, like, and in the context of French women, you know, like...
I think they were the new thing in town.
Yeah,
Polynesian
but
women,
like the French
maybe.
were extra shit in Polynesia. Like the French as colonizer were generally shit, but they were like extra shit in Polynesia. Ugh.
Yeah, and also it's so bad because, to be honest, I don't think that the man she was arguing with would actually consider Parisian women to be that much, smarter than Polynesian women anyway, because they were still women in their eyes.
Yeah.
So why? But maybe she was trying to do something like that because she might have known that was the case and was maybe playing into the whole, yes, but you're also proud nationalist, so how does this work with the whole... I don't know. This is just conjecture here.
I don't know. I feel like for that timeline and considering how it comes up again with the tribal face paint and that kind of shit, I think that as okay, Sofia, when it comes to like emancipation, sure, she's doing some cool shit, but she's doing it only for women like her, which is what white feminists have been doing, like historically speaking, and are still doing it right now, and often profiting off the work of black feminists. But again, discussion probably for another day because we're gonna get dragged down into it. But yeah, it's just super problematic, the whole...
Yeah. And anyway, in another episode with Irina, we've talked about how things like, intelligence, for instance, as a term, it's very squishy. Its definition relies on cultural, historical, and even class context to have any real meaning. So, whenever you're trying to have a discussion with someone about intelligence and how you measure it, you actually have to be very, very precise about what exactly do you mean by it, because intelligence as a term, it just means very, very different things depending on the group you're talking about, the time period you're talking about, the class of, the sort of economic and cultural background of the people. So, like, it makes no sense to just use it as an umbrella term for whatever.
But I mean, that would mean that you'd have to be mindful of the correlation between wealth and opportunities to become more intelligent, or the fact that the arbitrarily set standards of what it means to be intelligent by white people doesn't apply to other cultures and peoples.
But Eliza, this is all about cranial capacity. I don't know.
I mean, of course it's about, cranial capacity.
It's about the skulls, you see.
Yeah, but it's like the whole thing that we do, like us Europeans are like, oh my god, Americans are like so dumb because they don't know anything about European history. Yeah, and we as Europeans know jack shit about like American history or like the Pacific or Asia or whatever. Like, even if we just look at the context of World War II, oh my god, Americans like barely know anything about the Holocaust. Yeah, and we barely know anything about the Japanese internment camps.
And on that topic, I was just thinking about the fact that it's not just the fact that you don't learn things or details about, for instance, history of different African nations at school or Australia or things like that. But also, as you grow up, even if you're interested in history and you read a lot of stuff, I've noticed, for me personally, as someone who has had very limited contact with books about, history outside sort of Europe and maybe the Americas, it's much more difficult to pick up a book and go through it, because the learning curve is much steeper, of course, right? Because I don't already have some reference points, because even if you're bad at history in school, you still pick up some of the, I don't know, key events, key sort of historical characters. And then even if you learn about a specific event or a very specific thing, you already can kind of integrate it into a context, into a framework. Whereas if you're learning about, I don't know, some specific of Nigerian history, I don't have any reference point. So it's much more difficult. And you know how people are with things that are difficult. They tend to not particularly be eager to pursue them because it's hard. So yeah, there are many things that people need to be sort of aware of, that it's not that you don't have plenty of things to learn about, is that you don't even know how much you're... Yeah. Okay, so back to our thing. Sofia also argues that skulls have shrank for both men and women compared to our prehistoric ancestors, and hey, no one in her present day felt that they were more stupid than a rando cave person. There is also some skull measuring going on.
Oh, yeah.
As she points out that Maiorescu did not list the measurements of the largest cranial-sized skeleton found to date, which was, that of a lady. Destroyed with facts and logic.
Yeah, but her big brain probably made her like super uggo, and like nobody wanted to fuck her, so who's the real loser anyway?
Furthermore, Nadejde argues, all these dudes measuring skulls up and down fail to then compare those numbers with each individual's body mass. And my girl quotes me some of that Darwin herself to shore up her argument. And then she channels her inner STEM girl and lays down some formulae. So I'm not even gonna say anything about these. I will just send you the craziness that she puts on in her rebuttal.
Oh God, no. Just like general no to all of this, and it's like it's racism and like skull sizes and then math and like just old timey Romanian and like I just no. I'm gonna act like I haven't seen that and just like move on.
Yeah. It kind of breaks my heart to know that she did all this bending over backwards to facts and logic. And, besides the fact that she now looks really problematic with the whole skull sizes and stuff, at the end of the day, like all this effort for what? Because all these dudes were part of the intellectual and political elite of the country at the time, and they weren't really interested in her arguments. They would just say that, we're rational and we are just being reasonable here, but even if you destroy them with facts and logic, like, yeah, sure, whatever, girl, we still have the power, so go back to the kitchen. I don't know.
Definitely.
And she could have been doing, I don't know, better things, like
not
enjoying
racist.
And maybe enjoying a girls' night out, or at least, I don't know, build socialism in Romania instead of wasting time with assholes in top hats. But yeah. So up to this point, we've heard the look, we can do science too, brah, feminist arguments. But now, Sofia shows her true colors, and those are red, scarlet, and some more of that red. She goes, all this is fine and dandy, but when talking about the general intelligence of men and women, I am mainly talking about working women, because they constitute the vast share of women in any culture, including our own, instead of that small sliver of privileged ladies that are hardly more than ornamental appendages to wealthy men. And these working women not only work side by side with their men, like you pointed out, but are also known for their multitasking abilities and the variety and intricacy of their daily tasks, being often in charge of their households and the family purse, to the extent that there was one. They are also often the go-to person within working class or rural communities during conflict mediation or other disputes. By contrast, upper and middle class women, could not even own property in their own name because they weren't legally considered adults. Even the documents of the time in the Romanian principalities, basically, they show quite a few petitions and complaints being made by women, and not just for domestic abuse or things like that, but for maybe property rights or any sort of disputes over material goods. So yeah, and also they were considered sort of reliable witnesses by the authorities for certain issues, more so than maybe their men, because alcoholism was also a big problem in rural communities. So
I mean, still is. Yeah, but all of this is there, but there's also, just to keep things, nice and balanced, we do have to point out the fact that working women were also dying at much higher rates from instances of male violence. They're more exposed to that than upper class women. And there's also, obviously there's plenty of raping and especially marital rape happening in the upper class families and marriages. But there's also the societal protections, so to speak. Like, somebody will have the attitude, well, I won't talk to her like that because she's a lady. But when he goes out, especially if it's somebody from the upper classes, their attitude towards somebody who is working class is that, well, they're less respectable. They're probably sluttier because they're not a lady.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's I feel like whether you were upper class or middle class or lower class, it was still a mixed bag of crap. It's just the flavor of the crap and the shininess of the crap kind of differs.
Yeah.
So upper class women have the material protections, so to speak, and from certain forms of maybe societal violence, a little bit more, because there's plenty of asshole rich men, or even more. But on the other hand, the less freedom and when it comes to public life. But then working women, obviously, the harsh material conditions and access to better care is something that is sorely lacking. So just so we don't get into a point where, we come across as being like, oh yeah, the rich bitches had it bad, but the proletariat was
they were girl bosses. Yeah, no, they weren't.
Yeah, it was just different flavors of shit.
Sofia throws several layers of shade at upper-class women, accusing them not just of pandering to the male gaze, but also letting men infantilize them. You are part of the problem, she says, and the reason why we can't have nice things.
Well, yeah, but again, some women were definitely very much part of the problem, because we see that, because, pick me. But, again, so many of the upper class women as well are just so constrained in what society will allow them to do. Because, okay, fine, you're not going to go out and look pretty and marry the guy your dad says you have to. The fuck are you going to do?
Yeah.
Because it's not like you were trained to have a profession. You don't even know how to be a laundress. And it's not like they're not forced into marriages. Often, again, what I mentioned, the huge age differences. And it's not like if you're like, well, I don't want to do this, or if you go out and try to have some fun, it's not like mental asylums aren't a thing in which women are thrown into simply because they're like crazy bitches, but it's actually, just not wanting to do something horrifying.
Yeah, I think there's everyone needs to understand the fact that it's very hard to imagine that your life could be any different than the sort of things that you see around yourself.
Yeah.
Right? If for once, as a I don't know, middle class lady or an upper class woman, you don't really get to see and interact with people who might have different experiences beyond the superficial level. So that's one thing that hinders you from imagining that your life could be any more than it is. And also there's that thing where if you are told by everyone around you, both women and men, that you should be happy, this is what happiness for a woman is, again, it's really difficult to get out of that frame of mind if you have very limited interactions with people who tell you that life can be different than it is.
Yeah, so, it's a society of bubbles, of course.
Yeah.
It's don't really, and yeah, sure, rich women had help, servants. Let's call them what they were. They were servants. But it's not like you sat down and talked to them. I know we have all of these romanticized scenes that we see in like historical dramas, period dramas, of the lady of the house having a nice little cuppa with the servants. That shit didn't happen. In some households, yes, they did, because even back in the old days, not everybody was a racist, a raging racist, and there were some decent people, quite a few of them out there. But generally speaking, that was not the standard. It was, the roles were very much limited of how things happen and what you had and what you didn't have. I mean, again, so many stories I could engage in, but as a small side note, my maternal grandmother's mom was a domestic servant from a very young age. She was the domestic servant of a well-to-do Jewish family. She stayed with them for quite a while, and only left them when she got married and had kids, started having kids. Normally, you'd leave service the moment you married, but she got along with the family really well. The children were very attached to her, so she was allowed to stay on even as a married woman. And she had actually spent a couple of years in Cluj as one of the young ladies, paid BFF, you know, chaperones. One of the daughters became an actress, because this was very much an exception of a well-to-do family that was also very much forward-looking, future-looking. They were basically woke people. And in the years of I think it's actually the roaring 20s that she's in Cluj with the popping theater scene as a domestic servant to her, and that's what she is, and it's considered by many other domestic servants that she interacts with at that time to be a dream job, and it is. She has it really well. But it's still hard work, because it still means that when she, her employer, who is basically a young woman who she raised and wiped her ass basically as a kid, when she stays out partying until 2-3 a.m., she stays out with her, or has to stay up and expect her and undress her and clean her shoes before she puts them away and everything, whatever. But she doesn't sleep in until noon or the afternoon like, the lady. She has to get up in the morning and do her job. Yeah. And she was decently paid, and again, on the material side, they treated her well, and they didn't treat her like shit and spoke to her badly. She was allowed to, read books from the family library. So there was very much that attitude as well. But it's still...
There was a power imbalance.
There's a huge power imbalance. A huge power imbalance, and a very, very striking line across the sand that you do not cross. Yeah, that they are the better folk. So it's much more complex. I don't know how you feel about it, but I feel like this division and shade throwing at many other women that Sofia does isn't necessarily productive, and we see that happening again nowadays as well. Of a bunch of feminists out there who's like, there's only one way to be like a true feminist. Like, no, that's the whole fucking point of feminism, is that you have the freedom to be whoever you want to be, regardless of your fucking gender.
I do agree that it's not particularly helpful to sort of slander or throw shade at, other women. I'm guessing that there was also a lot of there was a lot of sarcasm, maybe, or even hostility coming from women in from upper class women who are basically, well, I'm not like those crazy bitches. So maybe there's a bit of animosity, sort of like not on a personal level, but, I'm trying to put things in context in terms of, besides the whole theoretical aspect of it. We all take offense, and we all have our bickering with people and groups of people, and I'm factoring that in as well when I'm considering this, that the shade throwing probably has to do with other discussions or things that were going on at the time.
Definitely, it's my big concern with these very divisive, or like these very black and white statements that Sofia makes, is that nothing is ever black and white. It's always a million shades of gray, and writing off upper class women as like traitors to their race, to their gender, is a wee bit out there. Because it overestimates the power that they have. Because again, economically, they have fancy jewelry and pretty clothes made of silk, but it's not like most of them have property in their name, or the husband can at any moment decide not to give her like pin money. So it's definitely. And again, don't get me wrong, it's not like I feel like rich women generally need to be defended, because especially nowadays, and it's we all know that the richer you are, the more conservative you are likely to become, and forget where you started out from. It's just that I always hate it when things are just made to be black and white. It's let's not make everything a yes and no issue. Sophia could have done better with this. Yeah. Again, I know she had a lot of shit to worry about, but
so if we get back to the text, we find that Sofia hits her sisters right in the feels by saying, "No woman with a single shred of dignity left would fail to feel a deep sense of sorrow at hearing their brothers, sons, or husbands hold them in such low esteem as Maiorescu's words suggest." So, interesting how she was all formulae and stuff with when addressing the guy, but now it's all about
the feels.
And of course, she also takes a jab at Maiorescu's closing statement. The one about why we can't have women with their 10% smaller brains to take part in this whole running of the world stuff, because surely even big brain boys like us have a hard time doing it.
And also periods.
So my girl just goes, "Yeah, I don't see how we could do any more harm than you're already doing, guys. And don't give me this culture and civilization bullcrap either, because England treats most of its people like crap, despite it being a powerhouse of pretentious neckbeards." I might have embellished what she says somewhat, but I took the liberty to do so, because I think I am capturing the essence of her rage.
Yeah. I think if she were to refer to English people in negative terms of that nature, I think it would be more along the lines of like foppish dandies than pretentious neckbeards. I think the point I'm trying to make is, I think this is the period of time when beards in general were like uncool.
There was a switch at one point where they became uncool, but I know that they were cool for a lot of the 19th century, because they thought for a while that they were sort of like a barrier against not infections, because they didn't have that notion of infections, but against disease anyhow. And then they discovered that actually, well, no. And then they became less cool. For the following point, I'm not sure to what extent Nadejde knew anything about Maiorescu's background. So I can't tell if this is sort of unintentionally salty or some exquisite "I see you, you class traitor motherfucker" maneuver.
I vote with option B, personally. Sofia does not strike me as the woman who will not do her research on her opponent. Like, if she was alive today, she's the one who will, social media stalk you in 0.3 seconds flat. and know absolutely everything about you. So I'm thinking she's going with the class traitor motherfucker maneuver myself.
I don't know, but she basically begins by saying once again that the main focus in a discussion about intelligence should be the working class, because rich people are degenerates who have little incentive for self-development and general curiosity.
Plus, there's all the cousin marrying.
Yes, and that so many of the great minds of the century, both in Romania and abroad, came from relatively humble origins. It's the children of the village teacher or priest who usually have that basic access to literacy that allows their curiosity and drive to be channeled in productive ways. Again, not sure this is intentional on her part, but it's pretty on the nose if she knows details about Maiorescu's family history, so I love that.
Yeah, I think she knew exactly what kind of shade she was throwing. Like, she had that down right.
In the end, she concludes by reminding readers how previous prejudices surrounding women, like how they are but mere vessels to receive the seeds of life during conception.
No. Just no. Never again utter those words. Ever again. Slaps hands, sprays water. Never make any references to the seed of life ever again.
Or how they weren't really fully human because we weren't sure whether or not they had a soul.
Yeah, it's the soul. The soul is in that missing 10% of the cranium, right?
Yeah. So she says, these prejudices have been proven wrong already, and yet somehow they're still a thing. People still cling to it. So basically, she's calling people out for not being all that rational as they claim to be. However, knowing Mr. Maiorescu to be an eminently rational and reasonable gentleman, Sofia urges him to revise his official stance. Now that his premise, i.e. that women be dumb because they have teensy brains, has been refuted. Maiorescu has seen your message and nothing. Because as always, the best way to win a debate is to say you did so or pretend that your opponent never issued a reply. So this is basically what's happening on the internet anyhow. So
Yeah, definitely. It's basically going into the comment section.
Yeah. So, Eliza, any concluding thoughts for this episode?
I would like to period shit in Titu Maiorescu's PlayStation. That is the deep political, moral,
statement,
theoretical, whatever, all statement that I would like to make at this point.
I mean, who am I to stop you, really?
But definitely, that's the energy you get from Titu Maiorescu.
You said you knew that he married up. Maiorescu did.
Yeah.
But this is just a bit of gossip here.
Ooh.
You might know it, but in case you don't.
Share that tea.
You know that he was also embroiled in a little scandal when he was a young man.
Oh.
Yes, because, you see, there were some public allegations made about him being inappropriate with some female pupils while he was, I think he was a school inspector or something like that. It's an female college.
Color me surprised. I'm just so surprised.
And here's that fun bit. One of the girls who made those allegations was Veronica Mikle.
No!
Yes!
No! Really?
And for anyone who doesn't know Veronica Mikle, the sort of muse of Mihai Eminescu, like the blah 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 greatest poet something, who was later sort of mentored by Titu Maiorescu, and there's this whole really crappy triangle of tension between them, and then there's Carajale coming in. So
oh god.
Oh, you do. So much upper class drama.
And what did Carajale did other than just sit on the sidelines and throw shade and like, here's a knife, do something with the knife?
He actually went in and sort of had a fling with Veronica.
Oh my god. I think we can all agree that Carajale was definitely the better lay. Like, dude has a sense of humor. Eminescu is just a sad fuck lamenting around about like the fucking stars in the sky and how misunderstood he is, and then just sad syphilitic noises, you know? So I feel I get Mika, I get her, I get Veronica. She knew what she was going for. She needed just a little bit of joy in her life.
She went for the fuck boy that one time.
He's a fuck boy, but he's like the less good looking but funny one. You know what I mean? You gotta admit that girl had range.
Yeah, I don't know what to say about all this. It's very messy, and by all means, from what I've read about Karajale, he was a piece of shit as well. So so Veronica did not have a good taste in dudes in any case.
But I think it's just like also the supply of men is quite.
I mean, she was married at the age of 14.
Yeah.
And she was married to a guy who was, I think, like 30 years her senior.
What have I been screaming about this entire episode?
Yeah. Okay, well, I think we can wrap up this episode. Eliza, thank you again for joining me. This was a riot, like it always is.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure.
And I encourage anyone listening to hit the follow, subscribe, or, you know, whatever button these apps have.
Why do you have to sound so boomery?
I mean, and share any episodes you like on whatever social media you might be active on, and, you know, just generally show the podcast some love.
Consensual love.
Yes. You can find us on Twitter at TUnrelated, one word. Or send us an email at... The email is in the description. Don't make me read it out loud. Sorry, this is all very bad and cringe.
Oh, God.
But please be patient with us, and I hope we're getting better.
Mornings are hard.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.